Azure and AI with Greg Leonardo.
The Azure and DevOps podcast is a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using the latest in .NET, Azure, AI, and DevOps. Listen on to learn how to increase quality, ship quickly, and operate well. The show is sponsored by ClearMeasure, a full-service software architecture and engineering firm. Find them at www.clearmeasure.com. And now your host, Jeffrey Palermo.
Welcome to the show. I'm Jeffrey Palermo, your host for helping you and your teams move fast and deliver quality and to run your software with confidence in Azure, all while using everything that the .NET ecosystem has to offer. A couple of quick announcements. December 8, 9, and 10 in Austin, Texas, in-person immersive training bootcamp, our AI-driven development bootcamp. I'm your trainer. This is the first time we've offered this class. And so if you want to make your team AI-driven and take everything that AI has to offer, then come on down to Austin, December 8th, 9th, and 10th. And you can sign up at clearmeasure.com right now. Also, I am hiring another .NET engineer. So get in touch with me if you know anyone. My guest today on the show is Greg Leonardo. He's been on the show multiple times, and we've included the links to the past episodes in the show notes. He's a principal cloud architect, a certified Azure Solution Architect Expert, and a Microsoft Azure MVP with over 2 decades of experience driving high-impact cloud transformations for global enterprises. His work sits at the crossroads of architecture and innovation and mentorship, where he crafts scalable, cost-efficient, and future-ready solutions that align technology with business strategy. And he's a recognized authority in Azure-native architecture, FinOps optimization, and AI integration. He's known for delivering measurable results, from reducing cloud spend to accelerating DevOps agility through Terraform and infrastructure as code, etc. And his leadership extends beyond technical execution as he actively cultivates cloud talent and fosters a culture of continuous improvement. He's a former Gulf War veteran, and he brings discipline and resilience and strategic foresight to every initiative, whether he's building global cloud ecosystems or leading high-performance engineering teams. And he's also a passionate advocate for the cloud community, and he shares insights daily through his technical writing and open mentorship. Greg, welcome back to the show. How are you, sir?
Welcome. I'm doing fine.
Awesome.
One little thing is, I think this year they opened our MVPs up to double things, if you remember. So I'm actually Azure and AI this year.
Fantastic. Well, yeah, listeners, if you haven't heard the past episodes, just go back in the catalog and check that out. Greg, you have been for a long time all over Azure. I want to dive into that, but I want to kind of back up and just for listeners who haven't kind of heard you speak before. What is it after so many years that just keeps you interested in just the cloud and the software space?
Well, I had an interesting conversation with someone probably about a couple weeks back on that subject. You know, I've never been one that ran around the industry and worried too much about finding ways to make money or doing things. My point in life has always been to elevate those around me and allow God to kind of enter in and do what he needed to do, you know, based on the fact that I was out there to help folks. And I mean, that's just kind of the thing that I've taken, you know, since my days in the military was, you know, if I can sit around and help folks reach their full potential or help them change their careers or give them an opportunity, that's what I'm here to do.
Nice. That's awesome. So, you know, last time we've talked about cloud topics before, but ever since the conference in May, the Build conference, and Microsoft pushing out a new version of Copilot, and now we have Visual Studio 2026 Insiders Edition that's out. That's the foundation for AI-driven development, and Microsoft is so heavily invested in OpenAI. It's really become a leader in that and kind of embedding large language model capabilities in practically everything. They're just kind of putting it everywhere. It's kind of hard to know what's ready for prime time and what's kind of a wait and see and all that. And so I'd like to talk about that with you. For people who are using Azure and all the different parts, what are the areas where the implementation of AI is like really useful, really stable that you've noticed, and can be used right now without getting cut on the cutting edge.
Right. Well, let's first talk about the elephant in the room, right? ChatGPT 5 came out probably about I don't know now, maybe what was that, 3 weeks ago?
Early September.
Was it? Yeah, it was the beginning of September, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
And the big problem that it showed was that the models and the things that were being created, even though $1 billion were spent, still didn't hit the marks that we needed. So the way I've always looked at AI very specifically is you have to be very cautious about its usage, simply because you don't know where it's going to go or what it's going to do. You and I have talked in the past about me being a very big advocate for how AI is used and responsible AI. But that responsible AI also goes into what's created and how it's done, right? There was a lot of taunted and a lot of money spent that really ChatGPT 5 did not hit. Mm-hmm. So when you start looking at how companies adopt, I think that slowed that down a little bit in the industry from that perspective, because people really didn't understand maybe what needed to be attached or what they could or how vulnerable that made it. So what it did was it opened up that there's a vulnerability in this as well. That it's not all that it's always cut out to be or that it's hyped up to be. So, me being in the AI industry and using AI quite a bit, I found that there are certain things that it can do and certain things that you may want to watch, with that. So I look at things that are anchored like Terraform, coding, the things where I look at the augmentation of what you can do each and every day, right? So you don't have to get into the realm of, doing code. You and I have been in the industry long enough to know that when .NET frameworks came out and scaffolding came out, how easy that made our lives from the perspective of how we could develop. Now we could develop faster, than we did before. I think AI is another, extension of that it's going to make life a little bit easier, for most people in an industry that have something to anchor on, that is really something they can, one, measure it against, but also two, that they can also test it against, right? So that you can see where things like that can help. So to me, a lot of AI from that perspective is really kind of, I want to say it's there, but it's not, if that makes sense. Because I think a lot of people have now seen the vulnerability of it. And I think that's definitely going to change things as we roll forward, just in where is that going to go and why. What does that mean? I don't think we've realized that yet, because this has kind of been one of those things that you and I have always discussed, the rush to market, right? We have a lot of things that went out there that it pushed out, and we start seeing that sometimes there's consequences when we push things out too fast. And I really believe that that's kind of one of the things that we hit 3 weeks ago was we pushed things out so fast, we lost sight of what we were actually trying to accomplish. And with that, we created some issues. So I'll put it.
That's a good point. I've had some conversations recently about AI's journey through the Gartner hype cycle or the hype curve. And some people have already plunged off of the peak of inflated expectations down into the trough of disillusionment, and then, coming back up it's called the slope of enlightenment. but some people have, and I think I'm one of the people that went down into the trough of disillusionment earlier than so many people, and probably you as well, because we pushed on the technology, pushed on it, and then realized, man, this sucks at this and it sucks at that, and then we thought, oh, but it's really good at that, it's really good at this, and that come back up to say, okay, what can we actually use that'll make us more productive? And I've read some articles about the companies that literally fired programmers thinking that AI was just going to magically be, quote, digital labor in air quotes. And now they realize, oh, shoot, it's still a machine that has to be operated.
Right. And I'll get to that. But if you remember, we talked about this many moons ago with Azure. If you remember, I went on a roadshow for Microsoft where I talked about the hybrid approach, and they were very dead set against that. But they brought me out because they wanted to hear about it. And come to find out, the hybrid approach is where everybody wanted to sit, right? Because not everything qualifies to be in the cloud. Not everything. It's like AI. AI cannot do everything. You know what? AI can't fix my HVAC unit. You know, it can't dig a hole in my backyard and put in a pool. It can't do that. So we need to start looking at that as being more of an augmentation. I look at it as like more of the Iron Man thing, the Jarvis, right? where you can sit back and have communications and it helps you be better, right?
Yeah.
And it may make it to where you don't need 12 developers, but you only need 6, right? Or you don't need to hire 12 more developers. You can do it with the 12 developers that you have, right? We knew in our industry that there were going to be 5 to 10 million jobs in the next 5 years that were going to go unseated because we didn't have enough people in technology. Now AI kind of leveled that playing field and gave us there. Now to sit there and go, now there's going to be none is crazy. So I produced a blog post probably about a month ago that talked about taskmasters that we're going to become. We are going to be managing AI employees. And that's what we're going to be doing as developers. I have agents that I write right now that do various things for me, right? One writes code, one writes Terraform. And I go out and I give them tasks to do around the same project, right? And I manage what they do. I go back and tell them when they're wrong. I go back and tell them how to correct it. I go back and tell them all the things that they need to do to fix the things where they're at, right?
All right.
But I no longer have to write that code. I become the manager and the taskmaster.
I have a beef with a word that you used.
Which is that?
You said employees.
Yes.
You said that these computer programs, the AI bots, you used the word employees.
Yes.
I want to challenge this.
So think about this. Back in the day, we had data centers, right?
Yeah.
Then we moved to the cloud. We had virtual data centers, right?
Yep.
They were just virtual. I'm saying virtual employees. And the reason that I say that is because they're not free. Okay. People automatically think that you can go use AI. It's not going to cost you a penny. They are going to cost as much as an employee.
Okay.
When you go look at what they're going to do and what you're going to have to pay for them, they are going to become employees because of the amount of money you're going to have to spend in order to get the results that you expect.
Now, why do you think when you say the word employee, that's almost expecting them to have some type of agency on their own. Why do you use that term instead of just, it's another piece of equipment? Because every piece of equipment has a cost of operation.
I know it has a cost of operation, but you don't argue with your equipment when it doesn't do the thing you want it to do. If you're out and your machine decides not to make your widget the same way the time, you're not going to argue with it. You're going to go get it repaired. That's not the same thing in AI. In AI, you have a conversation with it to correct its behavior. That is no longer a machine in our today's terms. So I look at those as being not self-aware. I wouldn't call them a human, but I do call them an employee because they're going to do tasks. And that's basically what we do as employees.
In east of Austin is the big Tesla Cybertruck factory, and it's not a labor-based factory. It's automated everything. Robot arms, everything's automated, and the factory operators are engineers. But we don't call the step that puts the windshield on, the Tesla employee that installs the windshield. It's just an arm. It's an arm that sticks the windshield on.
But it's different. You're conflating two things, right? That is a equipment that does a single role, right? That if the equipment doesn't do what it needs to do, you have to get it repaired. If AI doesn't do what you want it to do, you have to train it to be better. Just like an employee.
All right, we're debating about.
Think about that, because trust me, I struggled with it too in going into looking at agents and going into training AI. But at the end of the day, it's the same way you train an employee. I mentor AI agents that I have each and every day to get better at the things that they need to do, which is the same thing I do for employees and anybody in the field. So when you really think about it, they are going to become virtual employees that are good at certain things. And you can broaden or shrink their horizon to get the best things out of them. Like when I want to do .NET, I have an agent that just does .NET, right? I have an agent that just does Terraform, so I can get them to focus on a singular thing. Even though it's a broad singular topic, meaning they can use TerraGrunt, they can use whatever topic that they pick in the realm of Terraform, right? But then I have marketing agents where I don't put limits on them other than marketing, which is a much bigger umbrella. So when you really look at it, it's the same way as hiring people. I've been playing with agents to be lawyers, all sorts of things, asking them and getting into legal battles over certain things. That is not the same as a tool that puts on a windshield, because I'm not going to argue with it about how it put the windshield on. It's programmed to run and put that windshield on. And to me, those aren't the same things. When it becomes autonomous enough where it's managing all of the pieces and there's an AI that is managing all of that and putting the things in play, then that becomes a different topic, because then you can argue about it on what it did.
All right.
Or didn't do.
Well, we can set aside the arguing over terms and what might be, and let's get into what is possible now and what works now, and just illustrate that. So you mentioned like, Terraform agent for infrastructure as code automation. Specifically, you've gotten that to work and you're happy with it. What does that look like? What tech? What tool? Where the baseline
copilots
prompts
and agents. And basically what I do is I create a copilot agent, and then I reprompt it and I create a chat GPT agent, and I have them argue amongst themselves. I go in.
Hold on. So the GitHub agent running off of a task on a GitHub issue, the one that's hosted
I have it
in
running
GitHub?
Copilot very specifically.
On your computer?
Yep.
Or, okay. All right. So it's in VS Code, in Visual Studio?
Nope, it's in Copilot. It's in Microsoft's Copilot main point. I use the agents when I want them to be agents to write code. When I can put them in. The funky nature is you can play between the two. But what I'm doing is I'm testing them out against each other. I go at Copilot and I ask it to do a task, and I take that same task and I ask ChatGPT to do it. So and then I see what the results are between the two.
Just so we get specific, you're talking about Windows Copilot?
Yeah, I'm talking about M365 Copilot.
The M365 version of Copilot. Okay, so the one that has awareness of your company's SharePoint documents.
Yes.
In OneDrive.
Yep.
Okay, all right. And it's got
two
tabs,
I use the same
web versus...
I use the same principle on ChatGPT. I have the enterprise version of ChatGPT that runs in the same space. So I compare those two and I argue with them. And I'll give you, for instance, on where this shit goes awry, where stuff goes awry. Hold on. I'll give you, for instance, on where this stuff goes awry, right? So when I went and I asked it that, I said, hey, I've got a managed application that needs a storefront to be to approve a license, right? So you have to have a user agreement to approve it before it will go, right? I said, I need a Terraform module to handle that. And it gave me one, right? And I took it directly from each side and I put it into VS Code and ran it. Didn't work. So I went back to it and I go, here's the error. Here's the error. Here's the error. Here's the error. And for 45 minutes, I kept going back and forth with the error, right? Playing the game. Then I went back to it and I go, why are you making me play this game when this doesn't exist? And it goes, you're right in both scenarios. And I go, so why did you have me chasing something around that didn't exist in Terraform? So that got to the point on what I showed in my last talk in Orlando, that the words that you use will dictate the results that you get. I said create. I didn't say write. I said create. So what it did was it created a way for me to do that in Terraform. Didn't exist, but it created it.
Okay.
So when I asked it, and I went through the same process, when I asked it, and when I said, write me, it wrote me exactly what I needed to do, pumped it into VS Code, worked great.
Okay. So you're using Microsoft 365 Copilot, and then you're also using ChatGPT Enterprise.
Yep.
And then you are presumably you're pasting in instructions, or you're crafting the prompt itself, and then you're copying and pasting the output into your IDE. Okay.
At this time. So, I do have agents where I connect it to VS Code when I needed to write something specifically. My agents are there and will write code. But this is where I'm doing my testing. I'm telling you how I'm testing between the two to figure out where it's actually useful and why. Because the thing that I get into is that you and I both work in an industry where we talk to a lot of folks, right? And they go in and they use ChatGPT the wrong way. And then they come at us and they go, why can't you do this? Because this is what ChatGPT tells me. And you're like, but that's not true. Because this is the thing that you're actually looking for. And you're not asking it the right question. And the problem is ChatGPT is like a 3-year-old, or any of these language models are like a 3-year-old. It's going to give you exactly what you asked for. So if you don't know what you're asking for, it's going to give you an answer that you don't know anyway. And then you're going to take that answer and you're going to go apply it to somebody. And then it's not going to make sense. Because I showed somebody the other day at a client that I had that he had asked the question wrong. So I gave him the prompt and he got the right answer. And then we went out and did it together. And I'm like, all of that is based on prompting. And today we've rushed it to market so much and made it so easy that what you talked about at the beginning, where they let the developers go because it was going to be easy, isn't as easy as what they expected it to be, because they didn't ask the right question. And so that's where the problem lies.
I would put this into the category of a kind of like a Google search or a Stack Overflow search replacement. It used to be, Google Groups, Deja News, long ago it was Usenet. It was, I need to do this. I don't have that syntax memorized in my brain. Like whether it's Terraform or whether it's anything else, it's like when I'm doing something, if I know exactly the syntax, I've done it so many times. Okay, I just jam it out and I use ReSharper, IntelliSense, and the typing goes really, really fast. But if I can't quite remember, okay, what was the syntax to do that one? I know what I need to do. I just can't remember the syntax. Well, now I go do a search of something online. Whereas now I go to Copilot, ChatGPT, and it's merging the need to remember or search for the syntax and the addition of, let's draft it up. Save me some additional typing at the same time.
Yep.
How would you describe that category of usefulness that's
the
ready for prime time now?
Well, think about this. The usefulness that we used to have, that you and I used to run into constantly, was the guy that would go look up Reddit or something, right? And he'd pull up a forum and he'd immediately implement code, but he wouldn't read the 5 posts below that said the code didn't work, right?
Right, yeah.
And he spent days doing it. It's the same thing in ChatGPT, right? Or any of these language models. You have to think that the language model right now, and the reason why it can't go out to the internet as much as we think it can, is because think about all the contradictions in terms and things that out there that aren't real, that it has to try to figure out, right?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, the way I've always viewed things, from the perspective is, it's a useful tool if you know the questions to ask. It's not a very useful tool if you don't have to go. And that can be any tool. Think of you and I work on cars. If we don't have the right tools, we can't work on the cars, right?
Yeah.
Or we don't know where that thing goes, we can't really work on it. You're not going to go pull a carburetor apart if you don't know how to put it back together. Right?
That's
right. It's the simple factions of that we've rocketed this thing so fast that we've started to figure out that it's not what it's cut out to be. And then when you have something like what happened 3 weeks ago with ChatGPT 5 release, it then puts another chink in the armor, and it sits us in that point of, well, what is this actually going to do? And I think that's the philosophical thing that we're sitting at right now. But the problem is businesses don't view philosophics, right? They just go do it. Don't tell me about the pain, show me the baby. How many times have we heard that throughout our career? And that's the particular point that we're at now. Are we going to be able to move this thing forward, or are the shortcomings and the promises going to kill us at the end of the day?
Well, there are people
and that goes back to your search point. I use mine as a search engine too. But if you don't know what you're searching for, it will give you all the answers you don't want in the same way.
And one of the things that I found makes the technology more useful is the data that we give it. So you give it a better prompt. In preparing for this podcast, I do it all the time. You have a bio on your website. It's in first person. It uses I and me and all that. I throw it in there and say, convert to third person masculine. That saves, how many times do you use the word I in your own bio that's on LinkedIn? Okay, and mistakenly convert all of those things versus, nope, just do it automatically. Saves a lot of time. Also, Microsoft 365 Copilot, in Microsoft Word, I just discovered this new feature. I love it. Have some text, and I literally highlighted it, Copilot, converted it into a table. I know how to copy and paste things and make table cells in Microsoft Word, but yet another little bit of time saving. And so the hype is trying to get this technology to do a 20 or 50 step process in one prompt. But I think that we're just progressing, and we're taking smaller chunks and building, where I think the hype was all about, let me take a 20 to 50 step process and just have it automatic.
Well, I know. So I create agents. So I spend a lot of time learning the agent framework, right? And there's a lot that goes into it. The biggest things that I found out, one, use the right wording, but two, ask it to tell you what its understanding is and you to approve it before it goes and does anything, right? So every single one of my agents, when I ask it a question, it'll outline what it believes I just asked it and what its out should be. And then it says, did I get it right? And I say yes or no. And that people don't think that it is a discussion, right? The reason why they call it chat is because it's a chat. So if you give it this friggin' prompt that's like 80,000 lines long, and then it gives you exactly what you expect, and then your chat goes awry, that's because you didn't have a chat with it. You didn't give it the knowledge that it needed to move to the next step, right? And that's the bigger key in all of this. Everything that we go into and everything that we do is a chat base. Think about it back to the Iron Man example, right? He chatted with Jarvis. They went back and forth.
Yeah.
He didn't go, let me say a 50-page, dissertation, and now you give me an answer. They went back and forth, and they adjusted each other going back and forth. And that's where I believe it becomes very useful if you use it properly.
Okay. You said, I spent time learning the the agent framework.
Yep.
It's just can you define what you mean by the agent framework?
The agent framework is a list of instructions that you give it. Whenever you build an agent, you have up to 8,000 characters to do that, right? And your agent can be very specific. So when I write agents, I use probably as much of those 8,000 characters as I can in defining what it can do. And I usually start out with the whole point of, I need you to do these things, and I need you to act in this persona. And then what I need you to do is, you're acting in that persona, I need you to verify everything that you do before you give me an answer. And then I go into it where I need its expertise to be at. I need the things I need to cover, and I give it guardrails. Because what happens when you use prompting in an open session, right? It is that you're going back and forth with that. And that's why you can get hallucinations, because you don't build guardrails. When you first went into ChatGPT, it hallucinated because you would start by saying you wanted to do this. Then you would come back and you would go, okay, now I want you to do this. And it wouldn't be able to line them up because you didn't give it guardrails. So it may be thinking you were way over here, but you were actually really still talking about this, but you introduced something that now it's squirreled on. So think about how that is when we teach people where they get squirreled. You and I have sat in a meeting where, you're talking about a UI. The next thing you know, you're arguing over colors and images because the UI guy's there, and you can't get over that because you're in that hallucination trail now. And you're like, but that's not why we're here. It's the same process, just in a chat GPT form. So, where I do it is I build guardrails, and literally my agents, I can send you some of them. They'll tell you, if you ask them about, like, say, gasoline, and you talk to my Azure agent, he'll tell you, you need to go ask somebody else because that's not in his forte to answer. And he won't answer that. So I'm looking at these things as giving them human personas, that they exist in their levels of expertise, right? Because that's what you want to do. Too many people today, when they don't know something, they just get quiet. These things are the same way. They'll tell you, I'm not going to answer that because that's not really what I was, designed to do, or where my forte is, just like a human would actually do it.
Okay.
So you can give it guardrails.
So you're talking about the 8,000 characters, designing your agent. Just to be concrete, you're specifically talking about Microsoft 365 Copilot still, right? Okay. Yep. Where you go,
and it's the same thing over in ChatGPT.
Okay, you go to agents, new agent, give it a name, it asks for a description, another a text box, it asks for some instructions.
The instructions is the key.
Okay, and then there's also a knowledge section where you can give it URLs or file attachments.
So what I generally do with that, like, I have an Azure agent, right? So what I did is I wrote an entire set of instructions around Azure and what it can answer and what its boundaries are, and gave it its full understanding of what it can do. Then I went down to the knowledge section, and I connected all the documents and all the different doc libraries and things like that go to Azure, saying, I want you to prioritize these in your answers. And then that's what it's able to do. And it will leverage those and drill down to your answers a little bit better. So you wanted to talk about, how you clean up and how you anchor things. If you can anchor things in reality and give them real data sets to go after, and you give them real world results and tell them not to make things up, you're in a good spot when it comes to things like coding or, architecture, stuff like that. It can be debatable about this whole landing zone thing that Microsoft, that we worked on at AT&T with them on. The landing zone piece, I still think, is something that is a little bit of a desired taste, because, I think they went full bore with it. And sometimes, that can cost a lot of small businesses more money than they actually expect because of the things they've got to do to manage the different subscriptions and things like that. So I think there's a lot that goes into that. So there's things that you can argue back and forth about with it where you're like, hey, but if I'm doing this and I really don't want this, what would your recommendations be then? And you can kind of tweak things down from there, if that makes sense. I've had quite a few arguments with the Azure bot over time. So
you mentioned another word. You mentioned I can share some of these agents with you. I want to highlight that for the listeners.
Yep.
And now we're still in Microsoft 365 Copilot, which is an additional license on top of Microsoft 365. Like you've got it, I've got it. But if you don't, even if your organization uses Microsoft 365, if you don't pay a little bit extra per user to get the M365 Copilot, you don't have it, right?
Yep.
Okay.
And remember this, the agents are only shared in the organization. So they have to be developed and done within the organization. And the reason why I know that is I own an AI in a cloud company, and my AI company gives me my heavy duty Copilot license, and I can't share them with my son that works on the other side because he's handling the cloud stuff now. And I can't share those with him. So I have to copy and paste the instructions over for him because I can't share that across org.
Yeah. So to be
it's kind of silly.
So to be specific, when you said I can share it with you, you can't actually share your agents with me. You could copy and paste the content out of them, and I could build my own agent that happens to use the same instructions and the same file attachments.
The only way you can do it out of that is to put it in the marketplace. And that goes through a whole nother set of processes.
Now, I haven't tested this, but we have Microsoft 365 guests in our organization. Have you tested if you can share it with someone who's been made a guest of your org?
Yes, as long as they have a Copilot license.
Okay, so you would have to be paying through your org for them to have a Copilot license. Okay, I got you. But usually the way you build that structure is it's usually an employee group, so they have to get an email address anyway, because usually you're buying that as part of a package. So they're probably going to get an email address and all that stuff in reference to it as well. So now, do you know when you share it, do you know if it just clones it or if you're literally sharing the same instance where if they modify the instructions,
I think it clones it, I believe.
Okay. So if they modify it or you modify it, you from that point on, you actually have two different
that I haven't tested.
agents.
I don't know if it goes that far.
Yeah.
I want to say it kind of like instant spaces it, because one of the feedback that I gave them just on the M365 Copilot, I don't know if you've used it a lot. I use it quite significantly. It dies after a while. After you do so much chatting with it, it starts losing its mind and can no longer communicate with you, and it'll go, you need to start a new chat session. And I'm like, but we were making progress. And now when I'm making progress and I'm winning the argument, you now can't go anymore.
All right,
you need me to start a new chat.
There's a lot of developers who have no idea what we're talking about here, but it reminds me, as old timers, reminds me of the web forms architecture in view state, where if you dynamically added rows to a table, you could post back, and the view state would grow. And you could do that infinitely, but every single post back, you're posting back more and more and more. With the chat, the architecture of this, every message is taking the entire chat history plus your new message and sending it back to the server, which processes it through the large language model, and then giving you back everything, including the response. And so every interaction is bigger. And so inherently, there's no way to have an ongoing, long-running conversation. It's just not compatible.
And you know how I solve that? I use the browser version more than I use the desktop version. When I need quick stuff on the desktop, or I need to turn on a microphone, or I need it to listen, or I need to dictate to it, I'll use the desktop version. But 9 times out of 10, I'm doing stuff in the browser version because I found that to be much more stable for long-running transactions than the desktop.
Do you think it has a configured with a larger context
Possibly.
limit?
Possibly. I've been really struggling going back and forth giving feedback that I don't understand it, because it's literally, I would say when you break like the 20, 30 interactions, it starts losing its mind as far as it can no longer respond. It gets slower and slower. And then it just automatically just stops responding and says, you need to create a new chat. and you can't do anything to get that chat going. So you just lost that whole history of the conversation and got to go basically start it again. So I've been really good at trying to pick it up at where it left off and kind of getting it to that point by putting all of my pre-prompts back into a question to get it back to the same point. So it's kind of that's why I said a lot of this is kind of kludgy when you think about it, right? I mean, at the end of the day, do you really believe that's business ready? If you're going back and forth trying to solve something and you get 20 prompts into it and it says you got to start over.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
But to your point, one of the things I really loved about it is the fact that I can take an architectural document at a company and I can say, please give me a summary of this document and tell me what has changed since this document was written. And it'll give me a whole complete summary of the documentation and then tell me what's changed since then in order to know what to go update the document with. So no longer are you having to read through, 50 pages of a document to figure out what's good and what's not.
So diffing. Okay.
Yep.
Have you had any luck using it to generate architectural diagrams of any kind, whether it be Markdown or anything else?
I've been using Lucid app. They've got a couple things going on there. I've been giving feedback on that too, because I sat there and it's, when you go to it, it's like, please create this using Azure Elements, and it can't. That loses its mind.
Not yet.
It's a bunch of boxes with some lines drawn. I'm like, it's somewhat okay if you wanted to do like a simple, like wire diagram of how the boxes are going to match up. That's perfect. But if you want to go into any detail, it ain't going to help at all. It's not there yet.
Yeah. As we kind of get to the end of our time here, I want to throw in one thing I've noticed about the category of what seems to be stable and usable right now versus what may be, and Azure AI document imaging or document intelligence, that seems to be pretty darn stable and usable. But probably it's because it's just a rename of one of the cognitive services that probably released how many years ago, and they've been working on it and refining it, and now they're just rebranding it Azure AI something.
Yep. I think it's kind of a misnomer. If you remember back in the day, I used to be a BizTalk developer, and then they made this thing called Logic Apps in the cloud, and I'm like, wow, BizTalk in the cloud, and they're like, no, can't call it BizTalk, but it still used all the same stuff
under
as
the
BizTalk,
covers,
right?
It's just like Microsoft 365 is SharePoint.
And so when you start looking at these things, and you're like, wow, that kind of looks familiar. I kind of remember that.
Right.
It could identify chairs and tables and, stuff. And I think it's starting to get better. I still think it has a lot of some things, because I think where it's been very useful is in like manufacturing of components that expect a certain look, right? That they can key on from a quality perspective. That's good. Because like I said, if you can anchor AI in something, it's awesome. But if you can't anchor it, it's a hit or miss after that point.
Yeah. Well, one final question, then we'll close up. Have you found any of this technology usable for having some process just run in the background and actually do something that saves time? Because all the Copilot and ChatGPT, you have to kind of operate it and copy paste in things. But anything just kind of running off to the side.
Well, a lot of that has to do with the summaries and the document takedowns, right? Because I don't know if you've noticed, but one of the problems I've had with it is that you have to remain in your chat session. Otherwise, it'll start forgetting and not doing anything. So, I believe that's a spot too, because it's supposed to be a time saving. So that's why I call them the employees, right? I should be able to hand the employee something I want him to do, and he goes and does it. I shouldn't have to watch exactly what he's doing. I should get the result, right? And I think it's going to struggle a lot. When ChatGPT started coming out with this agent concept, they were giving it timescales, right? So I played games with it. I'm like, I want you to go write this app. I want you to do this thing. I want you to get me the documentation. Tell me how long that's going to take you, right? And it would say it's going to take me 7 days to do it. I'm like, okay, cool, go. And I come back, 4 days later, being the boss, going, hey, how are things going? Still working on it. So then I come back 7 days later and I'm like, hey, how's it going? Yeah, today's the due date. I still need, I've got this much done, but I still need this thing. So then I go to and I go, aren't you AI? What are you waiting for? Why does it take you 7 days to pump something out? And then boom, it would pump everything out. So I think there's a lot still in that arena to get something to go off on the back end side, right? If you remember, we used to have scheduled tasks, right? But they were things that were fire and forget. I'm not quite sure that we're there yet for the fire and forget side, right? I really believe that this is still going to be a transactional setup until we can start figuring out how that is. They're making great progress with things like summaries and phone messages and being able to take sales pipelines and things like there's certain things that can happen that to me, automation in the background can cover. But everyday tasks, I'm not sure it's quite there yet. I'm not saying that it can't be. I just don't believe it's there. I've tried it. I've tried to make it go down that path and it really won't do it. I don't know how much, have you played a lot with that and had any luck in that arena either?
I have. And it seems to be all about the size of the task.
Yep.
So, and really the GitHub Copilot autonomous agent, if your issues are in GitHub and you say, hey, take this issue and go with it, and it does all of its commits on a feature branch and then submits a pull request. And then JetBrains has its Junio autonomous agent that is in trial. It's available for free trial, and I think that's aimed at competing directly against the GitHub Copilot autonomous agents. GitHub is ahead. JetBrains is working on it, and the trial is just really right now for JetBrains IDEs. They haven't brought over the extension for Visual Studio just yet, but I mean, once it's ready, it will be just probably embedded into ReSharper for Visual Studio. But that concept, I think it's the same. I think it's the same as interactively using it. If you can get everything in that prompt, for example, if the issue was, hey, we have colors spelled in the British way all over this web application, we need to fix it. Okay, no problem. The pull request resulting from that, pretty darn predictable. But when you say, hey, I want you to upgrade this web form site to ASP.NET MVC or Blade, no, ain't going to do it. So there's an entire spectrum of prompts.
Exactly.
So I think we're going to have to just figure out, well, the tools are going to get better, but we're going to have to figure out how to chunk up the assignments so that to stay in the tool's sweet spot. And then, the tools are going to get better, but okay, for the next 6 months, what can it do? Great. Let's chunk it up in the size that it can actually do.
Well, I think a lot of that goes into looking at the neuro pathways, right? So when you start looking at these sort of things like the human brain actually works and what it's really good at from that perspective is the fact that we can stack things on top of each other and we have the memory to keep it moving. I really believe they've struggled with the memory behind chats. And that, going back to your chunk thing, I've always believed that, the smaller aspects you can do, you can make autonomous if you're asking on very small things. But if you give something complicated, it just really falls apart at a phenomenal rate. I did one of those things where I had it create, like you said, the code and update, and it phenomenally did not go very well. It didn't make it very far, and it just kind of puked all over itself at one particular point. And, because it's taking everything literally, right? And the thing that nobody gets, the amount of comments that were left in the old form stuff that it goes to read through, that it tries to use as instructions.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think one of the concepts that's different between actual intelligence and this artificial intelligence is our ability to determine when we're missing information. And regardless of how much detail we have in a particular backlog item or user story, regardless of what our starting point is, we're going to go look around. Okay, what code do I have? What do I need to do? And then there's going to be some point when we say, I need to go and ask a question from somebody, because if I don't ask that question, there's just a gap that, I can make an assumption, I can answer the question for myself, but the reality is, okay, I'm still asking the question, even if I'm the source of the answer. So these tools, they get the discovery, and there's an obvious point where a person would have said, oh, wait, I need some more information, but there's no hook so that the tool says, wait a minute, I need more information.
Yep.
And it just plows ahead.
Let me contact Jeff and get the information that I need in order to proceed.
Right. And so
I've been trying to do that in instruction sets, right? where I ask it to repeat, right? But at the end of the day, it is still conversational, right? And we are a compounding species, right? Which means we compound on the thing behind us. So we learn from the second before, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't learn. It just runs
There's no
through an
learning.
avenue of making decisions, right? And then when it gets to an end, it goes, here's what I came up with. And you go, but that's not right. And it goes, you know what? You're right. And it won't do the same thing again. It goes back in and tries to rethink what it just thunk.
Well,
And-
until it crashes and starts a new session.
Exactly. Until you've given it so much in this ball of wax, it just goes, start a new session.
So, it's once we understand the architecture of the technology that we're dealing with, well, then we can use it. The architecture is something where there's a whole bunch of language, in this case, C#, HTML, CSS, that's been trained into this model so that it can give us that stuff back. But all it's doing is pattern matching. There's no awareness, there's no knowledge, there's no actual understanding, there's no wisdom, there's no judgment, there's no discerning. It's just mathematical pattern matching. And as long as we understand the architecture, well, great. Now it's an awesome tool in my tool belt.
Yep. Yeah. And that's what I said. That's how we started this whole thing. If you're using it like a toy, you're going to get the answers that you ask for. If you're using that as an extension of what you already know, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And it really is kind of one of those things that if you understand the technology, how to use it and how to ask it the right questions, it'll cut your days down to nothing. At the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, let's wrap up from there. Greg Leonardo, thanks so much for coming on and updating us and what's the state of things. So yeah, great to have you.
Thanks, sir.
And until next time, dear listener, keep shipping.
You've been listening to the Azure and DevOps podcast. You can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and anywhere you get your podcasts. Visit our sponsor, ClearMeasure, at www.clearmeasure.com. And on behalf of your host, Jeffrey Palermo, thanks for listening, and may God bless you.